Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. In studio with me today is political activist, criminologist, and popular radio talk show host, Mark BENSCHOP. We will be talking about the PPP's 2020 election promise to remove any fee paying from the University of Guyana. In 1992, when the PPP got into office, they removed free education at the university level after the PNC government would have for countless years allowed Guyanese to have free education from nursery to university. Mark Anthony BENSCHOP has been relentless in his condemnation of this present regime, led under President Irfan Ali installed, has been relentless in calling the PPP out for a promise that they did not intend to keep. The PPP, however, has promised to return free education at the university level in 2025. Many believe it's an election promise because national elections are scheduled in 2025. Is the PPP hypocritical? Does the PPP care about the poor, about Guyanese in general? Mark BENSCHOP here. Mark, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you, Norman, and hello to all of your listeners, those who are in the UK, those who are in the US, in the Caribbean, and those who are on the battlefield in Guyana. Good morning and good afternoon. Good night.
You have been relentless in your condemnation of the PPP's promise to return free education. That is enshrined in the Constitution of Guyana, Article 27, I think. But you have called them out because in 2020, on the elections trail, one of the campaign promise was to return free education at the university level. That has not happened. Talk to us about that, Mr. BENSCHOP.
You know, the PVP has made so many promises, and majority, if not all of those promises, are just broken promises. They're just what you call elections propaganda in order to basically galvanize support and to rile up their support base and even outside of their support base into thinking that they are actually patriotic when in fact they're not. This is not just new for the PPP. They are basically they habitual to these sort of broken promises, lying to the public, and in order to get into office. We saw those lies in 1991, 92, leading up to the October 5th elections. They lied about taking care of GEC, now GPL. They lied about changing the constitution. They called it the Bornham's dictatorship constitution. They call it all manner of things. And they have gotten into office, and the very constitution that they told their support base that is dictatorial, they are enjoying every sweetness they accused the PNC and Burnham of enjoying. So the lies of the PPP has been there for quite some time. And so we recall in the 2011 elections, it was Ramatar who went to Linden and promised the people there 3,000 jobs. They never delivered 3,000 jobs. They promised the sugar workers all manner of things. They never delivered that to the sugar workers. They ignored bauxite workers. And that's just how they operate. And getting back to 2011, when they promised the people of Linden and Region 10 3,000 jobs, instead of delivering on their promises, not a failure, of course, they instead delivered, yes, but not the 3,000 jobs. They delivered three caskets to the people of Linden. In terms of the 2015 elections campaign, they made a bunch of promises as well, and thankfully they lost the elections. In 2020, they continued with the lies and their propaganda One of the biggest lies is free education at the university level. Now, the PPP attempted to give the impression that they were doing Guyanese a favor, when in fact it is the same PPP that deprived thousands upon thousands of Guyanese, deprived an entire generation 1994 when they removed free education, something majority of these guys in the PPP benefited under the Burnham government, free education from nursery to university. But they discontinued that in 1994 and prevented thousands of young Guyanese for 20 something years. They prevented young Guyanese to have access to free education at the university level. In 2020, on the elections campaign trail, they said that they are going to restore they're going to have free education at the university level. They never told the nation that they're the ones who removed it and deprived Guyanese. But it is over 3 years now. They cannot and have not lived up to their promise of free education at the university level. That's a big lie. It's a propaganda. Instead, they're saying now that, hey, the 5 year is not yet over, but closer to 2025, which means that when they get back on the political campaign trail again for fresh elections in Guyana, that is when they are going to make that announcement. Another big lie, because they can do it now. They just want to use that again for another political campaign.
Campaign.
And outside of that, Norman, let your listeners not forget also that they have made another promise of 50,000 jobs. I don't know if these guys go to sleep in their bunkers, in their basements, in their attics, wherever they go to sleep in their hammocks, and then wake up the next morning with an empty rum bottle next to them to make decisions and make these promises to an entire nation that affects an entire nation. 50,000 jobs.
But before we go to
Oh,
those jobs,
here,
Mr.
here.
Benschop, before we go to those jobs, I want you to give our viewers a real understanding of the degree of wickedness. I can find no other word to describe the regime's action. The degree of wickedness. Here we are, Mr. Benschop, in a country that is now oil rich. All right, outside of the Constitution, Article 27 saying there's a right to free education from nursery to university. We have the fastest growing economy. We have the fastest growing economy in the world. The World Bank predicted 34.3% for 2023. IMF 37.2. The GDP jumped at 98.6%. Guyana is filthy rich with a small population under 900,000. I would say 800,000 too. When we look at the issue of free education, why is the PPP not returning it?
Guyana is indeed rich in natural resources, indeed, but the people are living below the poverty level. The compliments of the PPP regime. The PPP regime, these vagabonds in office, believe that they and only those who are within that circle, whether it's some corrupt members of the private sector commission, some corrupt, questionable members of the business sector, who are wanted, some of whom are wanted by US law enforcement agencies, they're the ones who, and along with some immediate relatives and friends of these vagabonds in office, the Irfan Alis, the Barrett Jack Day, and these guys, they believe that they are the only ones who should enjoy the benefits. They are the only ones who should enjoy the beauty of Guyana and the richness of Guyana. Nobody else. Uh, the people at Port Moran got to suffer. The people in Blackbush Polar got to suffer. Just like the people in Kokwani and Ituni and in Linden and Rupununi and in Georgetown, all across Guyana, poor people are suffering in a country that is filthy rich, not just with oil, but bauxite and gold and diamonds and so forth and so on. So the entire country The majority of the people in Guyana are living in poverty. Minimum wage, majority of the people have to take home. Cost of living sky high. To rent a place in Georgetown, you cannot just have an ordinary job and want to live in Georgetown. Rent is minimum 60, $75,000 just for a one bedroom somewhere in a country that is supposedly filthy rich. But yet, when you look at their friends and cronies, just about 75 of the friends and cronies of the PPP own 95% of Guyana. The lands, all of the business deals, all of the contracts, and so forth are owned by corrupt, mostly corrupt businessmen who are linked to the PPPC regime. And it's unfortunate that a country as rich as our country, and you have people living below the poverty level. So when you talk about the GDP and Guyana is the fastest growing economy, what does that say to the ordinary man and woman? What does that say to the ordinary boy and girl? It says nothing. Why? Because you have a corrupt installed PPP regime.
Mark BENSCHOP here on Voice of the Diaspora. 11 minutes 23 seconds into the program. Look, before you expand on the issue of jobs that the PPP promise and the degree of poverty which you have elaborated on, when we look at what is happening in our schools, even at the university level, but basically in our schools, we see the PPP saying that they are going to offer school children free meals and so on because families cannot afford to equip their children to return to school with books, with bags, with school clothes, and certainly there isn't enough in Guyana for family to feed their children and so on. I saw a video by Dora Romeo Magnum where the PPP, the Ministry of Education, is giving school children cereal. And it's slimy, it's expired, it's spoiled, and so on. What is happening, Mr. Benshop, in relation to these situations?
Let me say kudos to DJ Magnum for playing his role. He has been, a very outspoken individual, and I'm glad that he's one of those who uh, is brave enough to be on the ground and not just talk. He is action oriented, and it's people like those that we have to salute as well. So DJ Magnum has his role to play, but I'm glad that he was able to bring to the attention of the public the quality of the cereal. It is not the first time that it has been brought to the public's attention, but I'm glad that he has reminded the entire nation about the quality of the cereal. Who knows whether it's expired? The PPP is not concerned about quality. They're concerned about corruption. They're concerned about deals. As long if you check the serial, who is providing that to the school, you will see the link that that person is either a corrupt individual who is linked directly to the PPP that has been given a deal to make some money. And then, of course, they got to pay some money as well. So they're not concerned about the health of our young people. What they're concerned about is the propaganda to make it appear that they are feeding these young people, when in fact they are just probably poisoning the young people slowly with that sort of filthy cereal that is being distributed to our young people. The very cereal that they are providing some schools and costing hundreds of millions of taxpayers' monies. You ask Priya Manik Chand or you ask Bharat Jack. Well, forget about Bharat. Barrett, Barrett, sorry. Forget about Barrett. Even Irfan Ali, you ask them whether they will feed their kids with that quality of cereal, or ask any one of those members of parliament or ministers in the PPP regime whether they will allow their kids or their nieces and nephews to eat that sort of cereal. And the answer is no. But yet they want other people's children, whether it's their supporters or not, they want other people's children to eat that quality, that filthy, filthy cereal. Um, and that's just the nature again of the PPP. Very wicked, very cruel, and very evil. And again, thanks to DJ Magnum for doing the work as an MP. Maybe we should call him Honorable DJ Magnum, because we have some MPs love to be called honorable, and citizens are out there doing what these MPs should be highlighting. But that's another issue, though, right? But thanks to DJ Magnum.
That's another issue. But on that issue also, some of in Guyana there is freedom of speech, there's freedom of expression, and so on, and a lot
The
of
freedom of speech and expression comes with it comes with
with the
some
price.
degree of repercussion.
Certainly, and that's the point I'm getting to. Here is a situation where people are being stifled. A lot of people are suffering because of being stifled. The radio license, they're being denied. A lot of things happening in that area. You have a radio station, and it seems as though that many people with private radio stations or who want to have a radio station that would not carry the narrative, the pro-government narrative, are being blackballed, are being sidelined, and so on. Talk to us about what is happening in that area.
Well, what I would say is nothing new. People already know it. All of your listeners, wherever they are, they already know it. Mr. Beresford knows that. Bantu King knows that. Rita Clark. All of your listeners know that. And those who are not commenting but watching, they know that. They know how vindictive the PPP is. They know what the PPP does in terms of when they're in office. They stifle majority of the people who do not support them, who do not share the same political view as theirs. They're stifled economically and even otherwise. Businesses are feeling the squeeze in Guyana. They feel the squeeze through customs. When the goods come through customs, they fight down these businesses, and they deliberately ensure that those goods are stalled at the wharf, and find all manner of things to penalize individuals, either high taxation, importation taxes, and all these things they do to Guyanese, especially the business, some members of the business community who do not share the same political ideology as the PPP. As it pertains to radio stations and TV stations, if you do not support the PPP, they do not give you a cent of state ads. We have several examples of what the PPP did when they were in office and headed then officially by Barrett Jack Dale.
Yes.
They starved the Kaichor News of ads for over a year. They starved the Guidance Stabrook News of ads for over a year, all because Jack Dale didn't like what they were saying or how they were writing.
You
So
took
if you
Freddie
don't
Kissoon
write
to
the
court
same,
too, Jack. You took Freddie Kissoon to court in 2011 because he said
if
something about him. All of
yeah,
that.
if you don't, well, it probably worked out in Freddie's favor now. Freddie is hugging up and kissing up and eating at the same table with them now. And I know that you deliberately mentioned that to solicit a reaction about that, but he's now eating the king's meat, so they're all jolly good fellow.
Well,
But with regards to how they starve and they go after media houses and even journalists, as you know, the same Jack Deere banned Gordon Mosley from State House or any press conference, all because Gordon Mosley was attending a CARICOM Heads of Government meeting and asked a question that Jack Deere didn't like. And right away, that was it, banned for Gordon Mosley. There were others who were treated probably the same or worse than a Gordon Mosley. And so the PPP has a record of being vindictive, being very oppressive, and at times deadly to their opponents. We know of what happened to Ronald Waddle. We know of what happened to
Courtney Crummy
Courtney
Wing,
Crummy Wing. We know of individuals being jailed, trumped up charges, whether treason
yourself.
charges, whether sedition, you name it, all these manner of things. We know of individuals who have been locked up. We know of dozens of women who were beaten, who were dumped at the back of police vehicles, who were locked up. We know of scores of women who were tear gassed, shot with pellet bullets, all under a corrupt, oppressive apartheid PPP regime. So it is not that this PPP regime has changed. They are basically the same. The only reason they're a bit hesitant is they know that because of social media and people constantly have the cameras on them. That is why they're being cautious. Outside of that, they would have continued on the same path of killing opponents, jailing opponents, trumped up charges against opponents, and so forth and so on. And so, with what they're doing to a couple of us who are owners of radio station licenses and television stations too, is basically try to strangle us economically. That they feel that if they strangle us, if they deprive us of access to state ads, not PPP ads, not Jack Deere ads or Earphones ads, but uh,
State
taxpayers ads,
ads,
because
yeah,
that's taxpayers' monies,
money.
that it should be equal treatment across the board. But no, they feel that if they punish a bench-up radio, and some maybe one or two in the audience may like that because one or two in the audience who are vindictive enough to say, oh, they're glad they want bench operator to be taken away. I will call and get it taken away. And these sort of vindictive stuff from hateful people out
But
there.
are you
Some of
being
them,
punished, and how are you being punished in terms of your radio?
I I don't like to use the term punish, because if you look at me, you don't see punishment.
You're being
I like to,
victimized.
I like to say to people that I'm an optimist. And when the PPP feel that they are strangulating us by refusing to give us state ads, and this is what I want their supporters to understand, that the equitable distribution of state resources, it doesn't belong to the PPP. And so I am not punishing. If you look at me, I don't look like I'm punishing. I'm a soldier. I know how to get by. And I continue and I maintain my position that the PPP withholding of state ads to Benchop Radio, as they do to Blackman Television and Blackman Radio as well, as they do to CN Sharma television station as well. I am not sure about others, but they do punish others. They sprinkle a little bit over by Enrico Wolford and his newscast, just sprinkle a little bit to make it appear that they're doing something and that they're not discriminating against individuals who have a different view. But the fact of the matter is, they are discriminating against those of us who own radio stations. I can speak on 107.1 FM's behalf that since the installation of the PPP regime as of August 2nd, 2020, we have not received a penny of
Wow.
state ads, not a
Wow.
cent of state ads. During the course of the pandemic, a group of broadcasters got together and they've invited me to be part of that gathering so that we can seek concessions from the relevant authority through Guyana National Broadcast Authority to wipe off whatever we owe them for that period as a result of the pandemic. The regime was very cold blooded, cold hearted enough not to grant any concession. They claim that, oh, they're making money. I don't know how we're making money, at least not 107.1 FM. But while they denied that possibility, they were given their friends and their cronies who own radio and TV station hundreds of millions of dollars worth in ads every year, every month, millions upon millions of dollars. So those persons, obviously, if you're being paid handsomely with state-owned, I mean, um, the people's money,
Money.
taxpayers' money, you can afford to pay. But if you're being deprived of that, then you can't afford to pay. And they're hoping that they can stifle some of us and bring us to the table to talk to them. Not me, not the radio station. We will continue to survive. We will continue to do what we're doing, whether we get state ads or not. But I just quickly want to, on that same subject, though, that when the coalition was in office, the coalition wasn't starving people of ads. But maybe they were starving people like me. It was the flip side of things until I had to battle to just get a couple of ads from the coalition government. The coalition government reached out and bent over so much to everyone except some of us fighters who had to fight to get a little ads at the end of the month. But they never starved PPP entities or pro
Or
PPP
Stabrook
media.
News or Kaichor News. They
Culture
didn't
News
starve
wasn't
them.
starved. In fact, Stabrook News got over a billion or close to $1 billion worth in ads. Kaichor News got probably a couple $100 million. But the bulk of ads were going to NCN and Chronicle. But whereas occasionally they throw a sugar cake or a fudge or tamarbal or mitai at me. Under this corrupt, racist PPP regime, you don't even get crumbs. You don't even
But
get coconut bucks.
but the PVP is arguing that the coalition was in power from 2015, and they did not return free education at the university level. How do you relate to that?
That that's a good question in terms of assessing what the coalition didn't do as it pertains. They didn't say that they're not going to do it. They're saying that they want to do it, but they have to assess the situation. Keep in mind that the PPP destroyed the country. Keep in mind that the PPP stole money, billions upon billions of dollars, taxpayers' money. Keep in mind that the PPP left a country or a purse almost empty. They have
Coffers, yeah.
destroyed every agency across the country. Every agency they have destroyed across the country. And what the coalition said that the idea to restore free education at the university level, mind you, this was all under the PNC prior to the PPP discontinuing it. The PNC was responsible for giving everyone, it doesn't matter of their race, their political affiliation. It doesn't matter who's sling left or right. Everyone were given access to free education from nursery to university. So it is not a case that the PNC or the coalition they were against that. Of course, from a standpoint of budgeting, you got to have sufficient money to ensure that this can become a reality. And when the coalition was in office, there wasn't billions of dollars in oil wealth and so forth and so on. And I'm almost certain that if the coalition had taken up their rightful place and was in government today, there would have been free education at the university level. But the PPP does not believe in free education. The PPP does not believe in education for the masses. Most of them don't even believe in education for themselves. We know who the eye flatterers are. We know who they are. They just don't believe in that. And so, again, under the PPP, they want to deprive an entire nation. They want to deprive young people access to free education at the university level. I do believe that as mistakes were made by the coalition, I believe that were the coalition given a second term in office, we would have seen campuses, university campus in maybe Linden, so that the people from Kokwani and Ituni and other parts of Region 10, instead of having to send their kids to Georgetown and have to rent a place, and that is expensive. On top of that, you got to pay for books. On top of that, you got to pay university tuition and so forth. It is really, really squeezing people. It is squeezing parents, and it is depriving young people an opportunity for an education at the university level. Compliments of a corrupt, vindictive, racist PPP regime. Even with the billions of dollars, Mr. Brown, they are still depriving a nation of so many things. Hence, shame on these vagabonds in office. And I say this, and I'm hoping that this is going to resonate amongst the thousands of people that come next elections. All Guyanese got to hold hands and vote the PPP out of office. Give them no room to rig the elections again. Give them no room for fraud again. But this can only become a reality if your friends and some of my friends in the opposition get their act together.
Mark BENSCHOP here on Voice of the Diaspora. 30 minutes, 3 seconds into the program. We'll be wrapping up soon. Mark, you have been an activist, a freedom fighter, a contributor to the struggle for liberation in Guyana for decades. Decades. You are not a fly by night activist, some of those people who come during elections or, come today and leave and so on. You have been consistent. You have suffered. Sometimes it looks like the night is endless, but you walk in the dark and still carry that baton, still carry that flag for freedom. What drives you?
Patriotism, I sometimes ask myself that very question: what drives me to make the sacrifices and to continue to do what I believe is the right thing to do? I do believe, and like I said, I'm a patriot. I do love my country. I want the best for all, especially young people, just like I want what I want for my children, which is a bright future, a proper education and access to that. And we should have a government in place who believes in these sort of things and not as corrupt as this regime that has been installed. This regime is bad for Guyana. It's unpatriotic, and I cannot sit by and do nothing, not just talk. But you got to be action oriented, and that is why I remain committed. Like I've said, I'm an optimist. I believe we can see the back of these criminals in office, and we can only do that if we do not allow them to stifle our voices. Do not allow them to drive fear into us or feel that they can lock us up and we can walk away not wanting to say another word. A lot of people are afraid of being locked up. A lot of people are afraid of speaking out. We have all, those of us who have lived through that in Guyana, through the brutal days of the phantom squads and murderous ministers of the PPP regime, being linked to death squads and drug lords and so forth, and killing squads. We have lived through the most brutal period
Period.
in Guyana under the PPP regime. And I think having lived through that and played an active part in standing up against those brutal dictators, the Jack Deus and them, and even the murderous killing squads and the drug lords and so forth. I don't think that anybody who would have lived through that can easily and played an active part in confronting those brutalities and those oppressors can just walk away and just say your hands up and forget about Guyana. We've got to continue to play, and which is what I believe that I do, to play a role, even from as far as I am, to play a role, to hope once again to see the backs of these criminals in the PPP, to see the end of them next elections. And even the as you coined, fly by night activists and so forth and so on. Uh, Everyone has a role to play, whether they are there for decades, whether they're there for a couple of years, whether they're there for a couple of months, whether they're there for a couple of weeks. We know who they are, yes. But at this juncture, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the game, it doesn't matter how long, every voice counts. Every single voice counts.
While I agree, and
Take
I'm
the
not going
time
to
out.
cut you. While I agree with that, I believe that if someone comes at local government elections to get some chickens to rear and to share out a red t-shirt and a black pants and shout I'm an activist, I would refer to that as fly by night. I don't think that that's any national role to play that will contribute to change in the country. And so there are many people who raise their heads calling themselves activists, to get a 5,000, to get some, handouts and so on, and they jump on social media and say what they have to say. And that is what I meant when I talked about fly by night. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you so much. But don't underestimate your listeners. Don't underestimate the people who read these things, the people who listen to these programs, and the people who watch some of those fighters on the ground, some of the fighters on social media. Don't underestimate the level of instinct that these folks have. These people, the people who are watching your program, who are listening to us right now, don't underestimate them. They know the realists. They know those who are for them. They know who stand up for truth and justice. And they also know the fake ones, those who are just there for a little likes and so forth. They know who they are. And so that is why I'm saying that even, you know, those who might be fly by night do have a role to play, but don't underestimate the people. The people know who fake and who not fake. And so um, I get your point with some of those who parade themselves, collect a little red T-shirt, a little crumbs money, and then they disappear. We saw a lot of them during the course of local government elections. They jump up. Some of them stammer while we know who they are, and then they disappear. Just like that, they disappear. Um, those very people understand that the PPP just used them for that purpose. And then when the PPP finished with them at the end of local government elections, the PPP done with them. And these people must open their eyes and understand when they're being used.
You have been fearless, and I recall during you mentioned the Phantom Squad, the Death Squads, and all these drug lords and so on. Your voice was perhaps the foremost prominent voice during that time, condemning those things. You spoke about it as if it has been in the past. Do you think that we have that sort of creeping manifestation today? We know of the killing of paper shirts in public, very close to a state house, I think it is. We know that business people, um, a businessman in particular, very, very rich, is actually showing the Guyanese people that he has a stranglehold on the Guyana police force, that they have to line up outside of his business to collect money. Are we returning to the days, the dark days of then, when your voice was very prominent? Are we returning to those days today? You see that creeping manifestation. So many extrajudicial killings have happened, and there hasn't been any justice. Quindon Bacchus, you name them, the brother that was killed in his bed, sleeping with his wife, and so on. No justice. Are you seeing that returning, or has returned in some kind of way today?
Yes, as alluded to earlier, that those were the very dark days under the Phantom Squad when there were no social media and so forth. In fact, the first time I heard of social media, it didn't exist long, uh, after I got out of Camp Street Prison. I didn't know anything about Facebook, and then they had some Yahoo something, and so times started to change, and it is different now than it was back then, when there wasn't a social media. There wasn't Facebook that people can go live and see policemen beating up on citizens, and that policemen probably shooting people and these sort of things. People will snap their cameras out, even when police go to their homes and try to abuse them and so forth, even when police officers stop them and probably take a bribe, traffic cop and these things. I'm not saying all policemen and women are like that, but the point is people have cameras all over. And these vagabonds in the police force, some of them, and even Phantom Squad and Death Squad killers who basically attempt to reform themselves. Some of them you will see they're describing themselves as businessmen now, because the PPP allow them to change their stripes, so to speak, and they are under the wings of some ministers, so-called ministers. Some of them are under the wings of an installed president, Irfan Ali. Some of them are under the wings of a Jack Dave, the dictator, and so forth and so on. So, the point is that they are attempting to make themselves legitimate businessmen. Some of them own, what is it, security firms and so forth and so on. So the killers are still there, but they are cautious now. Back then, many of them were ruthless because there weren't much repercussions back then, whether internationally or otherwise.
Right.
And so it is not that they don't have that killer instinct still in them. It is there, but they are cautious because they know the end game, what it's going to be for them, whether internationally or locally. They know that. They know what the repercussions would be. And so when you have some of these questionable businessmen, you've mentioned one who is alleged, mind you, to have taken part in the murder of paper sharks, and that is um, Azruddin Mohammed. Allegations against him, mind you. The police have not pulled him in for fitness, as far as we are aware. They ignored the fact that that is an allegation that was leveled against him. A wanted bulletin was listed for a guard that is close to the Mohammeds. No questioning, no nothing. And then months after, you see the very Azruddin Mohammed, who is accused, mind you,
Mm-hmm.
of killing paper shards, um, have at his business place scores of police, men and women, lining up for pittances, lining up for crumbs. That is the disrespect that we're seeing in the nation right now. And in response again to your question, the killers are still there. They're changing their clothes now, but they are there. They're more cautious now because the repercussion is not going to be nice at all. And they're well aware of that, that they have more to lose than anything else and that anyone else at this point in time.
You have seen recently the police targeting activists, especially in the diaspora, saying that they're wanted for certain cyber crimes and so on. You know who those people are. What are your thoughts on that, and what would you like to say to the Guyanese world in relation to what is happening in that area?
Well, I don't pay them much attention. It's a propaganda thing. Anybody with any sort of sense, and you don't have to even go to the University of IFLAT for that. That you cannot charge somebody for exercising their constitutional rights in another country. In the U.S., we enjoy those rights, the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so forth. And so we are entitled to that sort of right, that constitutional right. And no Moko Jombi or no Nimakaram or no Katahar sitting in Guyana at Freedom House or Office of the President can infringe upon those rights. Not at all. But if they want to play the game like that, it can be played that when they attempt to violate citizens' rights of the US, or if you those who are residing in the US, they cannot feel as though they can arrive in the US and feel free. They should be hit with some sort of lawsuits and some sort of penalty. So there will be that tit for tat if they so wish. And you know they love to come to the US. But they love to they love to sit in Guyana and threaten people who can come and who can't come. Well, there's always a way to react to them. Um, and so I'm not too bothered with them and those sort of petty little threats sitting there in their little offices at Freedom House or Office of the President and carry through with those threats. Nobody's, at least I'm not afraid of them and their little silly, dotish threats.
Well,
Never.
we're winding down, Mark Benschop. 44 minutes 8 seconds into the program. Mark Anthony Benschop here, criminologist, political activist, and talk show host. Very prominent and popular talk show host of the program Straight Up on Benschop Radio. Mark, corruption, oil is in abundance in Guyana. I understand that 214 million cannot be accounted for very recently. Would you wish to expand on what is happening in that area?
Well, we have on so many occasions, and last evening we have done so, and I noticed Wayne Caesar, the public accountant, was able to walk us through that along with Mr. Elson Lowe about the corruption, the nature of corruption under the PPP. 214 million US dollars is nothing for them because they're corrupt. They have
Yes.
access to billions.
Billions.
And it is unfortunate that you have a company like Exxon that is in Guyana, and Exxon doesn't want to be accountable to the people because you have an installed regime that is so unpatriotic that they do not, the PPP under Irfan and Jagdeo, they do not fight for the people. They fight for Exxon. We saw what happened with that court decision that they ordered that EPA and the insurance bond and so forth from Exxon. We saw and we heard what Jagdeo said in favor of Exxon and against the people of Guyana. Any other part of the world, thousands upon thousands of people would have hit the streets and called for the end of the PPP regime just because of that one statement. But in Guyana, we don't see it. Jack Dale is allowed to run around as though he's some kind of mini Kim Jong Un, running around as though he owns Guyana. A little piece of filthy thing like Jack Deere running around believes that he owns Guyana. And then you have another set of filthy folks like an Irfan running around as though they own Guyana and that they are untouchables in the sense of being so rich that nobody can touch them. But of course, they are, I don't want to put down the untouchables in India. I don't want to go that route at all. Not at all. I just don't want to.
Do you think Mr.
But
Jagdeo is racist towards African
I
Indians?
think I think he is corrupt. I think he's a criminal, and I don't think that he should have any place at all running that country. None whatsoever. I do believe that Jack Deo should be stripped of his immunity. I believe that Jack Deo should be stripped of any diplomatic immunity given to him. And I believe that he should be charged with crimes against humanity. He should be charged with fraud. He should be held accountable for the billions of dollars that probably went to the wastebasket, such as the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a failed fiber optic cable from Brazil, run all the way to the Soesdijk Linden Highway that destroyed that highway. He should be charged for the Amila Falls project, another waste project of hundreds of millions of US dollars. He should be charged for the Skeldon Sugar Factory, $200 million, and hundreds of people who died under questionable circumstances under his watch. For him to sit there and to drive around and living this luxurious lifestyle in Guyana while the people are punishing, uh, eyebrows should be raised about how Jack Deere should be prosecuted. We heard recently about his the allegations with him and Sue and all manner of things and corruption upon corruption, but yet he still sits there. We hear about the corruption with him and people who are connected to Exxon and the shore base and all these things. And the corruption and corruption, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody is doing anything. We have some members of the opposition who seem to be comfortable with corruption. And maybe some of them are putting their hands in that corrupt pot as well. That is why they're not out there. They're not standing up to this regime. Putting on a microphone or a camera on Facebook and talking and chit chatting is not enough. People didn't vote for them to just chit chat on Facebook and have a program on Facebook. Mind you, it's not that it's totally wrong to do that. But people elected, people voted for these MPs to go down in the trenches and stand up and fight for them, to go down in the trenches and protest, to stand up and expose the regime. Some of them do it, yes, but the majority of them are asleep. The majority of them have basically they're sitting there and selling the people out, probably for little crumbs and eating the king's meat. But when you talk, they're vexed. Look, the PPP is weak at this point in time. And in order to defeat the PPP, we have to have brave members of the opposition, brave officials of the opposition, brave officials in the parties, whether PNC, whether AFC, if AFC still exists, and other small political parties. They've got to be brave. They've got to hit the streets because it is the only language any corrupt regime, any oppressive regime understands. Protest. Not six people or three people or just wannabe. Thousands of people hitting the streets, you will see a different reaction by these corrupt elements in the PPP regime. And all these chaps, these corrupt businessmen, some of whom are wanted by many law enforcement agencies in the US, speaking of which, don't expect any of them to be handed over by Anil and these guys because extradition requests can be made anytime. But I suspect that those who may have, those law enforcement agencies, I suspect, who may have extradition requests, are reluctant to hand over those requests to the PPP because they know it's not going to get anywhere, because all of them, in terms of those corrupt bastards in Guyana who are wanted by US law enforcement agencies, are in bed with these installed officials of the PPP regime. Birds of a feather. F- f-
Flock together. Look, I asked you the question about whether Barjagdio, in your estimation, is racist because many believe that Barjagdio is the de facto president. I believe he is, and that when you look at contracts and so on, and black contractors not getting any major contracts and so on. People believe strongly that that is Mr. Jagdio's doing, largely, and his government's doing. And I want to go to this clip quickly because with all of these allegations being pointed at Jagdi, especially the one of him being racist, and that has been bandied around for many years. Freddie Kissoon said he was an ideological racist, and so on. Today, there's a clip circulating. Let us have a look at this clip because I want you to give your view on it, your honest view on it, and one more question after that, and we'll wrap up.
Well, it's okay, or
What are you?
I don't know what clip. I didn't see the clip, and maybe
Oh,
it's a good thing.
yeah, you couldn't see. Yeah, yeah. But here's Mr. Jagdio. A young black woman is standing there with him, and he's asked them to video it, I presume, because he's asking the camera people if they're ready and so on and so on. But he did not realize that he was being recorded already, and when he realized he was being recorded, he just put on a fake smile, hug her up, and start to laugh and so on for that photo opportunity. It is a clip that is circulating at the moment. Your thoughts?
But I saw it on the other screen here, um, and it is something that you have posted on your page, and I smile because I give it no ear. It is of not no significance to me, and I'm almost certain that I speak for majority of your or 99% of your viewers right now. Uh, those you could tell that those young ladies or the young lady in the picture, you can tell that they just felt good feeling up Jack Deere, and Jack Deere felt good being feel up by his his female counterpart, and I'm sorry, the female. Sorry about that. Yeah, a slip of the tongue. And so he's mimicking these individuals. He's mocking members of the African community, just mockery. Because he would not, we do not see these guys going into other communities and deal with other ethnic groups in the way that they feel that they can disrespect for propaganda purposes members of the African Guyanese community, and it's just an insult and shameful. But we can't expect better from Jack Dio. I notice you call him Mister. Please be careful. But
Wayne V. Caesar um, said, I say it again, Jagdio is a flat out racist. I rest my case. My final question to you before you give your closing remarks and we wrap up. In fact, one of or commentate, one of the persons in the comment section ask a question. Mr. BENSCHOP, are you going to the Washington conference? And are you bringing up this topic?
I have seen in terms of the conference being spoken about, um, and I have not been invited to the conference, and I
I
just
spoke to
have no
Mr. Burke
idea.
last night. I had a show with him, and he said you were invited.
Now, I don't know what constitutes an invitation, but outside of that, I believe that I was sent a link to pay $100 um, for something there. I don't know if that constitutes an invitation, but nevertheless, it's anything in the struggle helps the struggle. Anything to expose the corrupt PPP regime, the racist PPP regime, is helpful. And so I just wish Mr. Burke all the
But you
best
don't.
at that
But
conference.
you're saying you weren't invited. Are you saying you weren't invited? You didn't receive no official or formal
Now, I'm not.
invitation to the
I don't
conference?
want to get into. I'm not the kind of person that sits by and wait for official invitation, but I received a link. Again, I received a link to to some $100 to attend the function. Again, I don't know if that constitutes an invitation. In my mind, I don't think it constitutes.
Okay.
Nevertheless, I think it's a good event. I wish Mr. Berg all the best at that event. Will I be attending? I believe at this point in time, it conflicts my schedule with other stuff. But it is an event that if people have the time to go and to be part of it, I think also when these things are being planned, it should be done in a holistic way where every party and every group, because there are lots of us who have suffered in Guyana, and there are lots of us who have firsthand information. And if approached in a respectful manner, then the outcome of these events can be tremendous. Um, I have I have, along with scores of other people, been on the battlefield there in Guyana at a very brutal time, of which discussed earlier. And I think at some point in time, folks should accord at least some degree of respect for those who would have uh, been brave on the ground there through those brutal years of the PPPC. And so this is not to cast any sort of negativity on the part of the conference, but just to
No, you
be
made it clear.
straightforward.
You made it clear it's a good initiative, but
Yeah,
I'm getting. Are you saying that there should be more, you know, there should be more involvement of people like ourselves when these things are being
everyone,
planned? Everyone,
everyone
and that
should.
is not happening.
Yeah.
And added to that, you know, there wasn't, you didn't construe what you received as as an invitation to the conference. I asked Mr. Burke about it on my program last night. I did ask him if Mr. Benchop was invited, and he said yes, you were invited. And
I
so
beg to
and so
differ. I beg to differ, but I do think it's a conference that folks should pay attention to. These things are helpful. Every and anything
in this struggle.
exposing the corrupt PPP regime is helpful. Is helpful. And again, I don't want to make it an issue as to whether I was invited or not. But I'm just saying that I received no such invitation other
Invitation,
than a
and
link
that's
for $100 stuff.
and
That's
that's
yeah. And
understood.
I couldn't sit here and just say and mislead your listeners or so. And neither am I sowing any seed of being disgruntled
Or anything, yeah.
at all. But I just feel that, especially those of us who are in the diaspora, who play a role in the diaspora and have been playing a role for decades too in the diaspora, if we are to succeed and see really good results, then there should be more unity. It shouldn't be where one man locked away in a room
More
and
networking.
plan and then throw the plan at people and say, run with it. all organizations in the diaspora, all groups in the diaspora should be accorded that degree of respect.
Mark
Thank you.
BENSCHOP here on Voice of the Diaspora. 1 hour into the program, your closing remarks.
Well, my closing remarks is unity is the way forward. And it is not a situation where anybody should just jump on a podium, jump on a mountaintop, and believe, that it's all about them. We cannot succeed and we cannot see the back of the PPP regime if that is the intention or that is the approach. We can be, especially in North America, a very powerful group of people if unity becomes the order of the day. Right now, there is disunity. All of us need to get back to the table, iron out our differences, and then you will see our approach in unity will cause the entire PPP regime and their corrupt friends to tremble. And I say that not only over here, but over in Guyana as well. Those members of parliament, those who are sleeping, should wake up. Wake up and understand that an elections is around the corner, and they should be far more proactive and brave to stand up. And to those corrupt ones in the opposition, we know who you guys are. We know who you are. And to all of our brave people in social media as well, people who are speaking out, people who are commenting, they're also playing a role. The Bantu Kings, the Wayne Caesar, who is now, as we call him, occasionally he appears and very regularly now speaking out. We got to say kudos to these individuals. Eileen Griffith, who's watching your show and is all over in other shows as well. These people play their role too.
They do. They
They're
motivate us. They
They
motivate
share
us.
all of our links.
Yes, they do.
And
They
so
do.
we've
And
got
kudos
to salute
to
them.
them. But talking about unity, let us have a look at this clip one more time. Unity or fake unity?
Well, it's okay, or
Mark BENSCHOP, it has been a pleasure having you here on Voice of the Diaspora. Of
But
course,
but you show that link. Sorry, Norman. And people don't know you and I go way back. Way back. We go even from Linden Market days when we started, when you were protesting. We go way back. We don't agree all the time on everything.
decades.
And we abuse each other out privately too, right? Occasionally throw a little jab at each other publicly.
Yeah,
But
but that's
whenever I
but
call you or we video chat and I show you this fist, you always remember.
But you know what, Mark? You know what I remember, and it makes me cry. Most times I remember it. Coming around to Waddle's death anniversary, I recall vividly when myself, Waddle, and you were at Linden when we visited Tong Kong. So when we went to the front line and we sat on the stall. And talked and so on and walked down the street, and there was someone took a photo of us, the three of us, walking towards the town council. Look, it's been decades, but we have been there, and Waddle was brutally slaughtered under the PPP regime, and there has been no justice for Ronald Waddle. When I think of those memories, when I think of us walking the streets together in protests and so on, it tells me that decades and decades have passed, but it seems as though the monster has not been devoured.
And that is true, so true. But we've also got to look at the monsters within us as well.
Thank you.
And calm those monsters down. We have some mini dictators amongst us as well.
Yes, sir.
And we've got to remove them or
Yes, sir.
bring them to the table to let them know that that's not the way forward. Mr. Brown, I just got a school route to make, but I thank you so much
Mark,
for your invitation.
wonderful, and thank you again for being on this program.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll be hearing from you soon as we approach any elections on the horizon. Thank you so much for being
Thank you,
on
sir.
Voice of
And
the
to all of your
Diaspora.
listeners, thank you guys.